Hey guys, my name is Pansy and welcome to my Awakened Mystic guide. In this video, we're going over Awakened Mystic skills, mechanics, add-ons, rotations, and more. Before we begin, majority of you guys watching my videos are not subscribed to my channel, so please do hit that sub button, like, comment, and hit the bell icon so you get notifications when I drop a new video. And check me out at twitch.tv/I'mPansy. If you ever have any questions, feel free to drop into chat and ask them over there. Alright guys, let's start off with the build for Awakening Mystic. How we're going to do this is we'll go through the awakening skills first, then the main skills which you would want to have, and then also some of the nice to have skills. Then we'll go off to the rebombs, and finally we'll talk about the core skills. All right guys, let's start off by selecting awakening and immediately scroll down and get flash step 3 because some of your awakening skills need this. For your awakening skills, let's start off. Dragon Eyes is your shift E buff, gives you a lot of stats. We use it off cooldown while grinding. And Tranquility is shift space. This gives you 3 shards and recovers WP. Very nice to have and use, so remember that one. Infinite Fortitude, it's mostly utility for PvP, but it also has a tier 3 add-on. It's not necessary for your initial build, so we can keep that off. And in the future, if you want to use that for the tier 3 add-on, by all means take it. Tidal Burst is shift RMB. It's one of our primary generator of martial spirit shards and does decent damage, low cooldown, so we're going to level it up to max. Rapid Stream shift LMB. This is a self buff as well as a debuff, but the damage is not as good as Tidal Burst, so we don't hold it out for the full duration. We just use it for the first tap to debuff the target. Next up is Rising Dragon. It's one of our core skills, as well as a 3 shard spender where it spends 10 of them for the Sea Dragon's additional effect you see on the bottom. It also debuffs the target as well as does additional damage. So that's minus 15 DP there. Then we have Spiral Torpedo. This is an important mobility skill for Awakened Mystic because it doesn't have collision and it lets you reposition against mobs really easily. However, it's unprotected, so be careful in PvP. You can take the core skill for the Spiral Torpedo, but it is protected but with a gap. Then we have Sea Burial, one of our signature skills, as well as a 3 shard spender. Want to max that out and also take the flow. Also another signature skill of Awakening Mystic, Wave Orb. Excellent damage skill, 3 shard spender, and a debuff, plus recovers HP. Take the flow. Then we have Gushing Waters. This is one of the new skills added for Awakening Mystic, along with all the other Awakening classes. And this skill collapse. It has 100% crit rate and does high damage, pretty low cooldown, synergizes pretty well with a lot of other skills. Then we have Dragon Shatter. This is a DPS skill, low cooldown. You can use RMB to do the full damage of it, or you can use it after certain skills by pressing RMB just to take the last hit. This is a tier 2 add-on skill, so I like to use it pretty often. Then we have Double Flash, no brainer, take it. Hurricane Sweep. This has a few uses. One, it's a spirit shard generator, as well as recovers HP. And using SF, you can cancel into Wave Orb. So very important skill. Next up is Dragon's Pit. If you're a brand new Mystic and you don't have enough skill points, you don't have to take Dragon's Pit or Dragon's Rip, but they are really useful skills. This does damage as well as debuffs the target for 30% for 10 seconds. And Dragon's Rip is an AoE vacuum. This is one of our primary utilities in small scale and large scale fights with the vacuum. And recently they buffed it to also have a slow, so I like to take it. For core, we'll take Tidal Burst for now, but for PvE, generally it's between Tidal Burst and Spiral Torpedo. We use Tidal Burst over Rapid Stream because we hold out Tidal Burst for a lot longer duration for the full damage. Whereas Rapid Stream, it does pretty low damage comparatively, so we don't hold it out, and this forward guard isn't as beneficial. Okay, now coming to the main hand. So I'm only going to take the skills that we absolutely need. There are a lot of skills you can take for utility and PvP. We're going to ignore those for now, but let's go over everything. First, we have a Heavy Fist. Ignore that. Just a True Strength. Because of the Rabombs, I'm going to take this up to level 3. Soul Basher doesn't really have much use for us in Awakening, so you can ignore that. Triple Flying Kick, the only use would come into for PvP, where you can use this to start off with an evasion buff, but other than that, really not necessary for us in PvE. You can just leave it as it is. Adamantine, I like to lock it. Don't really need it. Mass Destruction, obviously we want that. It's one of our primary skills for repositioning ourselves. As for all the flows for Adamantine, you can just ignore these since you locked this one. Thunder Pound. This is actually a skill which has some use in the end game. We don't really use it in our main DPS rotation, but it doesn't hit too weak. And it has a really nice use for grinding at the endgame spots like Hadum by this skill, Shackling Chain. It's a 9% evasion debuff. While Thunder Pound is a tier 1 add-on, it is worth getting add-ons onto this to maximize on this. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about this when we get to the rebombs. As for the follow-up skills, they're pretty useless. Just lock them and don't take them. For Somersault, I like to keep this at level 1. I really have no use for leveling it up all the way to absolute by any means. The main use for me is just to have a quick switch to main hand. And that's about it. Dash Buster, don't need it. Hidden Claw is actually a decent skill for repositioning. I mean, we have a lot of options, so it's not mandatory, but it doesn't hurt to just keep it open and use it as an iframe when needed, or to do a quick backstep. Ignore the flows for Hidden Claw. And for Fist Fury, I never use this. There is a protection on it, but yeah, we got better protection skills and better heal skills, so I never really needed this. Twisted Collision, this is a really nice skill to take. If you can, get the Absolute, because you use this to cancel into Sea Burial, and whenever I use Sea Burial in PvE, I always use Twisted Collision before it for that extra bit of damage. The flows are useless. You can keep it for PvP just to have that additional super armor rotation if you really want to do it. But remember, Twisted Collision is unprotected. Elbow Edge, this is a luxury skill. You don't need to level it up immediately, but this flows from Flash Step, so just to cover more distance, you can take the Absolute. But like I said, it's not necessary. It's a luxury skill. The flows for that, however, ignore those. Sweeping Kick, ignore that. Roaring Tiger, really nice skill to have, but mostly for PvP. However, we do need this for one of our Rabams, so you can level it up to 5. Rage Hammer, you also want to level up for 5 for one of our Rabams. And for PvP, you definitely want to get the absolute version. And I take it back. We need level 3 for one of our Rabams as well to level up Elbow Edge there. Moving on to the secondary skills, definitely want Flash Step 3, Silent Step 3. Pulse Frenzy is a luxury skill. You don't need it. Prey Hunt, definitely want to have this because this increases the attack range for skills like Thunder Pound and Rage Hammer when you're under the effect of Prey Hunt. And for Thunder Pound, it's really nice to debuff a large group of enemies. Definitely want Binding. This is your grab. Obviously get it to absolute. Then we have the passive skills, max these out. And that's about it for the main skills. You can lock these two over here. All right, let's go over to skill enhancement and talk about the Rabam skills. So as you can see here, my primary choices are going to be these 3 skills, starting with Unbridled Wrath. This is a extremely hard hitting skill. And if you put someone on the floor in PvP and use this on them, it claps. So definitely a must have. I used to use Nature's Wrath for the 12% accuracy buff. I tried it out. I tried out both of these skills. However, I found it more reliable to debuff the targets with Thunder Pound rather than relying on hitting this 12% accuracy every time. You can do either or, but having Unbridled Wrath gives you another impact skill where it does a bit of damage and clears up mobs. So I like to incorporate this in my skill rotation. I'll show you the rotations with both Unbridled Wrath with and without, and you can make the choice on your need. So if you need the accuracy, you can do Nature's Wrath, but I love the skill. It hits so hard. And like Unbridled Wrath's utilization in PvP, I like to go for Perfect Blow. While Iron Fist Fury is a super armor, I feel it's a bit slower than Perfect Blow, and Perfect Blow is still a frontal guard, so it helps protect my approaches. But yeah, both of these skills are decided based on PvP utility. Not a bad thing to have when you're dueling for spot and stuff. And yeah, they don't have any use for PvE grinding, so you might as well pick your PvP favorite here. And lastly, we have the choice between Thrashing Wolf and Raging Wolf. So Thrashing Wolf does a little bit of damage, and it can help you get down a slope compared to some other skills which rubber band you. Other than that, I really have no use for it because it's not a large distance. Maybe using it off a cliff or something to get down a little bit of distance, sure. But honestly, I just use Raging Wolf because it's a 20% attack speed buff, and it helps start off the fight with 20% attack speed. Doesn't stack with Crouching Wolf, but if you need it, you can use it. And lastly, let's talk about our core skills. We have Tidal Burst, Spiral Torpedo, Rapid Stream, Sea Burial, Rising Dragon, and Wave Orb. I prefer Tidal Burst for that forward guard. It's a lot more protective than the other options here because we hold out Tidal Burst in our rotation to generate shards and stuff. You can use Spiral Torpedo. I love this in PvP because I'm always using it. So that's not a bad option. This, it's pretty underwhelming. Wave Orb, forward guard, it protects you in PvP, but once again, the others are a bit more utility. You could take Rising Dragon for a float if you really want it, but you're giving up good protections, which can help you play a bit more aggressive. And same thing for Sea Burial's Bound. Personally, I don't like taking this because it's not a knockdown and it just eats up one of your CCs. I prefer to go with Spiral Torpedo for PvP and Tidal Burst for PvE. So if you're a Mystic starting off, you can get the essential skills pretty easily if you ignore the skills for the Rabombs and a lot of these fluff skills and luxury skills over here. If you just take the essential secondaries, passives, and just the core awakening skills, you can start off with pretty low skill points, but you would want 1600 to 1700 to be comfortable and have everything you need in order to play Awakening Mystic effectively. All right, now let's talk about some of the mechanics of Awakening Mystic, starting with her dragon. So there are certain skills which use the blue dragon that we all know and love. So one of them is going to be Dragon's Pit, then Rising Dragon, Sea Burial, and Wave Orb. So this is how it works. For Dragon's Pit, you don't need any martial spirit shards. You just put the skill on your hotbar and use it. Does an AoE, dragon comes out, slows targets, damages, great. Then we have Sea Burial, which consumes 3 shards to use the dragon. If you only have 2 shards, it'll consume a shard, do more damage, but not use the dragon. So this is Sea Burial. Then we have Rising Dragon, which needs 3 shards. It'll consume one of the shards to use the dragon. So here we go, Rising Dragon. And lastly, we have Wave Orb. We need 3 shards for that, and we can cancel into Wave Orb. I'll go over it later, but this is Wave Orb. And once again, the dragon comes out and extends a pretty decent distance. And here is Sea Burial with 2 shards and no dragon. So it does additional damage and consumes a shard. But at the end of it, if you keep holding RMB, you will use the Dragon Shadow to regenerate that shard you lost. Next, we have Gushing Waters. This is an excellent skill, does great damage, synergizes with the other skills pretty well because it's at a similar cooldown. Same cooldown as Sea Burial and almost the same cooldown as Rising Dragon. So there's a few ways to use this skill. You can't just use it straight up by pressing LMB. You can, however, put it on your hotbar and use it like that. Then you have a few other skills which you can use it right after. So the first one's going to be Mass Destruction like this. Right after Mass Destruction, just hit LMB and it uses it. Then we have Rising Dragon. This is one of the common skills I like to use preceding Gushing Waters. Just LMB after Rising Dragon. Next we have Sea Burial. So LMB after Sea Burial. Like that. Then we have Spiral Torpedo. Just LMB after Spiral Torpedo. And lastly, we have Dragon Shatter. So RMB and then LMB. Those are the skills which precede Gushing Waters. This is a skill you'll be using all the time. It was an excellent skill they added for Awakening Mystics. Really gave us some great damage output, and yeah, enjoy it. Now let's talk about Wave Orb. It's a really powerful skill. However, you need to do a casting animation in order to use it, or you have to use certain skills preceding it in order to skip that casting animation. So just to show you, this is how the casting animation looks. And then when you let go, it releases Wave Orb. So the first way you're going to cancel it is by doing Hurricane Sweep. However, you'll be doing it backwards by holding down S and hitting F. And this does a low kick. So it's just one quick low kick. This is important because as you saw, it generates a martial spirit shard. So it synergizes with our rotation really well. When you're at 2 shards, you do SF and then use Wave Orb. So you'll get the 3 shards for the full impact damage of Wave Orb. So let's first generate 3 shards. And okay, this is how you cancel into Wave Orb using Hurricane Sweep. There's a few other ways you can cancel into Wave Orb, but because Hurricane Sweep generates that 1 shard, we really don't use them, but just to show you, here they are. The next one is going to be by using Flash Step. So whichever direction you go, you can use it, like even backwards, and you can use it going forwards as well. Lastly, I want to touch base on Silent Step. I do use it when I'm playing Succession to get behind the target and do Wave Orb, but for Awakening, I don't do that. There are better ways to cancel into it, and it's not even a cancel when you use Silent Step. It just casts Wave Orb without charging it like this. So yeah, don't do it. Now let's talk about the slowing skills for Awakening Mystic. One of Awakening Mystic's plus points is her utility, so it's important to know which skills use slow. I did go over it during the build, but here it is again. It is Wave Orb, Dragon's Pit, and Dragon's Rip. These are all heavy slows with 30%, and Wave Orb is actually a tier 3 add-on. So in PvP, if you want to be super toxic, you can actually put a minus attack speed, casting speed add-on, as well as minus movement speed add-on, just to really mess with your opponents. Here's how it looks like. But yeah, for PvE grinding, we definitely want to utilize the bonus of the tier 3 add-on. So we don't do this, but it's good to know. Next up, I want to talk about repositioning. It's really important to constantly reposition yourself while grinding and get that back hit damage. One advantage we have over Striker, I know hearing an advantage over Striker, that sounds funny, but yeah, one thing our Mass Destruction does is it repositions a lot quicker. So we can definitely get behind targets a lot quicker. Striker has to either use a flash step back, sound step, or backstep or bomb. So make sure you're using your mobility to get behind the target as much as possible and maximize your DPS output. One of our primary skills is going to be Spiral Torpedo because it doesn't have a collision. While I'm running into this scarecrow right here, I can't go through it. However, Spiral Torpedo can, like this. So that's also a skill we use in our rotation very often to get behind the target and do big damage. And lastly, let's go over the healing skills we have for Awakening Mystic. So her self heal is actually pretty pog. First one is going to be Tidal Burst. It's pretty good HP recovery and we use it often. Then we have Hurricane Sweep, which is instant 200 HP recovery whenever it's not on cooldown. Then we have Wave Orb, which heals 200 after charging. Then we have Roaring Tiger in our main hand over here. That's also 300 HP and it's instant. Lastly, we have Fist Fury. We just don't use it. We have better skills in Awakening to heal with, so it's just something I wanted to point out, but Tidal Burst is gonna outperform that. So yeah, keep that in mind. Using Hurricane Sweep and alternating with Roaring Tiger is a really quick way to heal yourself up when you have some distance in PvP and such. However, in PvE, I've been able to sustain myself pretty well with the Awakening skills for the most part. I'm always repositioning, so I'm avoiding damage that way. And she just has a lot of good sustain in her skills, as well as good protections and mobility to move around and reposition to avoid skills. So yeah, good to know. Now let's talk about add-ons. You don't have to follow this exactly as it is or even at all. Make sure you tailor your add-ons to your needs and your playstyle, but this is a place to start off. Now, before we get started with the add-on explanation and why I chose these, make sure you guys remember the main logic behind add-ons is that by the time you start your main DPS output, you want to have all the primary add-ons proc. That is like monster damage, attack speed, accuracy minus DP, and if you can, crit hit damage as well. Now, obviously, having all the add-ons procced is going to be ideal, but that's the logic behind it. Now, let's talk about tier 3 add-ons for Awakening Mystic. First one is Wave Orb, and the second one is going to be Infinite Fortitude. In my opinion, Infinite Fortitude is a DPS loss to use in PvE, so I don't use it. But for PvP, it synergizes really well because you go into a group of players, or if you're being attacked, you use it, and you can easily proc this off. So you can either go for the PvP damage or defense or any of the other ones, but definitely not something I use in PvE, so I left it off my list. All right, let's talk about my add-on choices and why I chose them. And remember, you can definitely change this up however you want. I'd consider taking Gushing Waters. That's also a really good option, but these work fine for me. Anyway, starting off with Sea Burial. I took monster AP and attack speed on this one because I usually start off my entire rotation with Sea Burial, because when I'm using Crouching Wolf to pull some mobs, I might not get all of them, so I also pull them with Sea Burial. It's only on a 7-second cooldown at tier 3, so this will be back up long before you need it for the actual DPS, so it's one of my primary starting skills. Then we have Rapid Stream. This is our primary debuff for DP, while skills like Rising Dragon also debuff the target. This is the reliable one, which you can use pretty much anytime. It's not something we hold out very long because the first hit is all you need to debuff the target, but I like to put the minus 15 DP and the plus 4% accuracy on it. Now, one thing to note, we don't have Tidal Burst on the add-on list because it's only a tier 1. That's why it's also another reason why I have the attack speed and monster AP on Sea Burial, because that's one of the skills we start off the rotation with, and having these two for that really helps out the DPS. We do have tier 2 add-ons on Dragon Shatter. I always use Dragon Shatter right after Rapid Stream because it cancels out the initial hits of Dragon Shatter and just takes the last hit, and it's a really easy tier 2 add-on to proc. And Rapid Stream, we only need the first hit, right? So I feel that it synergizes pretty decently. So I put crit hit and attack speed on this one. Then we have Spiral Torpedo. The only reason I put back attack damage and crit hit damage on this is because I always use Spiral Torpedo to get behind the target to do my big damage, whether it's going to be one of the spenders like Rising Dragon or Wave Orb. It always precedes one of the big DPS skills. So I felt using back attack damage and crit hit damage was okay. You can change this up however you want. For Wave Orb, we're going to use Monster AP and crit hit damage. This is a tier 3 add-on, so we're going to maximize our DPS output here. You can use crit hit damage or something to get a little bit more DPS, but that's up to you. Wave Orb usually comes at the end of the rotation, but you can use it in the beginning if you know you can destroy the mobs without having the full DPS output. Maybe you use Wave Orb and use Sea Burial in its place for the finisher. I generally do that when I'm going to a lower end spot and I'm greatly overgearing it and I know it's going to die. So your DPS rotation will vary depending on your current AP versus the spot you're grinding at. Next up is Thunder Pound. I use accuracy and minus evasion here to capitalize on Thunder Pound's shackling chains ability, which debuffs the target by 9% evasion. So just maximizing that, and that really helps out. I'll go into more detail on how to utilize that while grinding later in the video. All right, let's start this off with talking about how you pull the mobs. The primary ways I'm going to be pulling the mobs is by using Crouching Wolf. It's only on a 5-second cooldown, so by the time the mobs are grouped up and I get 3 shards and use it again for the 20% attack speed, it'll be ready. I also use Sea Burial, as I mentioned earlier, to aggro the mobs as well, and also Spiral Torpedo to reposition myself, hit the mobs, as well as proc the 16 AP 10-second buff. Now let's talk about the DPS rotation. I'm gonna explain it really slowly in the beginning, and then we'll do it at full speed with the keybinds on screen. Now remember guys, you're really not going to be using a standstill DPS rotation that often. You're going to be repositioning constantly, pulling mobs, and you're going to be in awkward positions where the mob layout might be in such that some skills are better DPS than other skills in that situation. And also it's going to change based on how much AP you have versus the spot you're grinding at. So just remember, this is not the end all be all rotation. There are variations. We'll talk about it after the explanation, how it could change up, but this is just something to start you off with and explain the general logic behind our rotation. All right, now for the damage rotation, we're going to go over it really slowly. We're going to start off by pulling the mobs. There's many ways you can pull the mobs. Depends on the layout and how they're positioned. So I like using Crouching Wolf. I use Spiral Torpedo, Sea Burial. Just remember, Sea Burial will consume the shard Spiral Torpedo generates. So just be careful of that. But yep, let's just use those skills right now. All right, now we're going to generate the second shard with Tidal Burst and then go into Rapid Stream, Dragon Shatter for the add-on procs and the 3 shards. So Tidal Burst, Rapid Stream, Dragon Shatter. Now we have the 3 shards. Next, for the main burst damage, we're going to use Crouching Wolf, and you can use Crouching Wolf to get behind the target to add to your DPS, and we'll use Rising Dragon into Gushing Waters. Then we'll use Spiral Torpedo to reposition ourselves, as well as proc the 16 AP add-on, and then use Hurricane Sweep into Wave Orb to finish it off. So here we go. Crouching Wolf, Rising Dragon, Gushing Waters, Spiral Torpedo, SF, Wave Orb. Then you just repeat the rotation, and instead of Wave Orb, you'll be replacing it with Twisted Collision into Sea Burial, because Wave Orb has a pretty high cooldown compared to the other skills and it won't be up in time. Now we're going to go through the rotation at a normal pace. I'll try to call out the skills as I do them, but first we're going to pull the mobs, either Crouching Wolf, Sea Burial, Spiral Torpedo, whichever, as they group up. Tidal Burst, Rapid Stream into Dragon Shatter, Crouching Wolf, Rising Dragon, Gushing Waters, Spiral Torpedo, SF into Wave Orb, then repeat. Reposition yourself as required. And second time around, instead of doing Wave Orb, we're going to use Sea Burial. Now I'm going to do the rotation again by using Unbridled Wrath. Now there's no right point to use this. I sometimes use it right after Rising Dragon, Gushing Waters into Unbridled Wrath. Then I'll go into Spiral Torpedo and Wave Orb, but there are other times I'll use it after Wave Orb to get the maximum damage out of it with the tier 3 add-on here. and to clean up the mobs. So it's really situational, and you can just throw it in wherever you feel comfortable. So remember, I say this a lot, but the rotation is going to change depending on what your AP is relevant to the mobs you're fighting. So if you greatly overgear it, then obviously the DPS rotation will tend to differ as well. But here's an example using Unbridled Wrath. So we're going to pull the mobs as we always do, Sea Burial or Spiral Torpedo, Crouching Wolf, whichever. Let them gather up while we do Tidal Burst for the 2 shard, Rapid Stream into Dragon Shatter for the 3 shard. Now we're going to do Crouching Wolf, Rising Dragon, Gushing Water, Unbridled Wrath, Spiral Torpedo, SF into Wave Orb, and repeat. Now, as I mentioned earlier, instead of doing Unbridled Wrath right after Gushing Waters, you could just save it for the end and clean up the mobs. And it's just nice to just keep on hand as an instant damage skill to kill some stragglers and stuff. So even if you don't use it in the main damage rotation, it's still an option. It's a good skill overall. There were times that I used Nature's Wrath for that extra accuracy, but then I started utilizing Thunder Pound whenever I felt that I needed that accuracy. So basically, to get into Thunder Pound, you can do Perfect Blow or that quick switch into the main hand. And whenever you're in the middle of your whole DPS rotation, just grinding mobs in general, you usually have Prey Hunt up already. So to just debuff the mobs while they're gathering up and stuff, it's pretty simple to do. You just have to make sure Prey Hunt is up and just Thunder Pound, and it has a pretty good range and covers quite a bit of a distance, and yeah, definitely useful to keep in mind. But also one thing, Thunder Pound also generates a shard, so it doesn't really hinder your DPS rotation. Just use it tactfully to get you into the right spot. Now let's talk about how the rotation can change and some variations. It really depends on the layout of the mobs, how many shards you're starting off with. Like when you're going through each pack and killing mobs, you're never going to start with the same number of shards. So remember, you can use shift space to start off with 3 shards, immediately go into Crouching Wolf for that attack speed. That's always good. Now remember also the skills which generate the shards. These are going to be Tidal Burst, Rapid Stream, Spiral Torpedo, Gushing Water, Sea Burial's Flow when you hold down RMB after Sea Burial, Dragon Shatter, and Hurricane Sweep. In addition to your Awakening kit, several skills in your pre-awakening also generate martial spirit shards, but the one skill I use the most is Mass Destruction. It's an excellent skill to reposition yourself really quickly behind the target and to get those back attacks for that additional damage, but also it has a secondary effect. When used as a part of a combo, you get a 6% accuracy buff for 10 seconds. This is really important because at high-end spots you want as much accuracy as possible, and it stacks on top of the 4% you can get from add-ons. So here's a quick demonstration. Let's do Rapid Stream into Dragon Shatter into Mass Destruction. So you saw there it generated the shard. We got the 6% accuracy buff along with the 4% from the add-ons, and it all stacks. So this is really good to use right before you unload your main DPS, like Rising Dragon into Gushing Waters, then getting behind a target with your Wave Orb. You want to use Mass Destruction to get that 6% accuracy buff, as well as position yourself to the back. The skills which consume the shards are going to be Rising Dragon, 1 shard for Sea Burial, as well as 3 shard for Sea Burial, and Wave Orb. So for example, if you already have 2 shards, you can immediately start off with a Dragon Shatter to get that 3rd shard, then Crouching Wolf for the attack speed buff, Rapid Stream into Rising Dragon, Gushing Waters, etc., and go into that damage rotation much quicker. So based on what you have, it could definitely change your rotation. Alright guys, that's it for this video. I hope it was helpful. If I did make any mistakes, or if I forgot something, or you want to add some tips, leave it in the comment section down below. We'll update the guide I maintain in my personal Discord channel for Awakened Mystic, and that way we can have the up-to-date information. Even in the future, if something changes, I'll put the changes in there. Please do like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell icon so you get notifications when I drop a new video, and follow me on twitch.tv/I'mPansy. If you ever have any questions, you're more than welcome to drop by and chat and ask them there. I'm always talking to chat, answering questions, and just interacting. We have a good time. Even if you don't play BDO, if you're into other MMORPGs or anime, we're always talking about that stuff. So hope to see you guys there. Take it easy.